Hello, welcome. Consensus layer call 93, issue 594 on the PM repo. And yes, now we have a 6x6 grid. This is very aesthetically pleasing. Okay, so today we are going to go over merge-related items, including the recent Goerli merge, a number of minor discussion points, and there are some documents circulating for mainnet, Bellatrix, Epoch, and TDD, which we had pre-committed last week to talk about this week, so we will do that. And then a couple of issues related to MEV Boost, maybe also a general update. And then there are some discussion points for 4844 that came out of a recent community call. If we don't get to it, we will certainly get to it at the next call. We will see how time plays. Okay, let us get started. We had a merge. It happened approximately 12 hours ago. The network currently looks healthy, although there was much in the interim. Perry, would you give us the high level, and then maybe we can go as you're giving the high level. If there are additional points on any of the points from a particular client team, please client team jump in at that point so we can discuss those points, just so we can kind of all get on the same page and understand how to move forward. Perry?
Yeah, hey everyone. So like Danny said, we had the merge on the Gully network about 12 hours ago. One of the things that was peculiar about the merge this time was that we had two terminal blocks. So essentially one block that was produced with the difficulty of 1 and another one with the difficulty of 2. And some amount of chaos is attributed to that. Essentially, we did have some, so we were looking at about 90% participation before the merge, and then we dropped to roughly 70%, and for a couple of epochs below the required 66%. So I think we didn't finalize for 4 or 5 epochs. Essentially, a couple of nodes had gone into their own forks or were offline for another reason. I have elaborated those under in the issue tracker linked in chat. Yeah, besides that, one of the biggest things that helped with participation over the last 12 hours is that there were a couple of Nimbus nodes as well as Lodestar nodes that had wrong configs. Either they were unupdated execution layer nodes, or they weren't configured with the required JWT token. Once that was fixed, we noticed participation rate increase up to the present 81 to 84%. That means if we were to remove config issues, it would have potentially been a 90% to 84% drop, which is actually not that bad at all. Yeah, and besides that, we have 2 or 3 client issues that we've noticed. So the first one being a Nethermind issue shortly post TTD, and that had to do with Nethermind's processing of pre-merge and post-merge blocks differently. Essentially, they had a bug where if there were multiple terminal blocks, it was hard to fix. The fix was known. We had the fix deployed on a couple of nodes as a test, and I think it will be included in the next release. And one thing to be noted was that we already do have a test for this on Hive tests. So if the Hive tests are all passing, then we wouldn't have noticed this bug. We had an Aragon stall before it self-healed. And essentially, Aragon had built a transition block on top of a side fork. And once it got stuck on that side fork, and once 128 slots were done, it kicked into optimistic sync and fixed itself. We had a issue with a rocket pool node producing an invalid block, and the node was Lighthouse Aragon, if I'm not wrong. And we're still investigating that one, but potentially updating to the latest devel commit fixes that. I'd let the client team talk more about that. And there was an issue with Bezu incorrectly replying to the canonical chain to Teku. But I would let the Bezu team elaborate on that one as well. If you look at the issue tracker, there's also a status for most of the issues that we've mentioned. And yeah, I guess that would be updated over the span of the next day. Yeah, I think that's about it for me.
Thank you. And the Nimbus and Lodestar nodes are online as well. Are online now. Those are the Nimbus team and Lodestar team nodes.
Yes, the Nimbus team and Lodestar team nodes are back online, and we knew it wasn't necessarily a client incompatibility because the EF was also running those client combinations, and we didn't notice any issues on our nodes.
Got it. Okay. Are there other? Would any client team like to go deeper into some of the issues that they solve? The steps that are being taken to resolve them. If there's additional tests that need to be brought in here. Just any other comments?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the issues in Aragon. So we did have a bug in our previous version with the transaction indexing, but I'm still not sure what happened with the rocket pool, because the operator says that he actually uses our latest version, and we saw in the log that an old transaction made it into our transaction pool. So still not sure what exactly happened there, and whether this bad embedded block was due to that bug or something else. So still investigating. And I would also, I'd like to ask about this 128 block. Maybe Mikhail or somebody could explain briefly to me why this need to wait for 128 slots.
Shortly, this is like the protection from the fork choice poisoning that can occur if you're trying to import the block with the parent that is not available. Like, the merge transition block built on top of a parent that is not available, or just randomly generated parent hash. In this case, the syncing response will never resolve, and CL will just, if CL switches to such a block, it will get stuck there. And if a lot of CL nodes and validator nodes get stuck in syncing, they will not be able to do their validator duties and build the honest chain. This is why we're waiting for 128 blocks before optimistically switching to this block, because this should give enough time for honest chain to progress and
note these are for actual unavailable chains. I think the Aragon issue is that it was not executing these side chains that were available, and if the side chains that are available during the transition are executed, then this issue would not happen. It's primarily to avoid the case of someone's fork choice being poisoned with unavailable blocks. If the blocks are available and they are executed, then this doesn't happen. So I believe that there was a PR up in Aragon to do this partially, but if it had any sort of parent depth into the proof of work chain, it was not actually executing and was returning either accepted or syncing, and thus getting into this deadlock state for 128 blocks.
Okay, I need to take a look at how is this, take a look more into the logic around the terminal POW block.
Right, I guess it's after the merge transition, if you don't execute side chains immediately and just return accepted, even if they're available, that can be handled and is fine. It's worth the additional load during that transition to actually execute these to not enter into this status.
Right, I see.
Yeah, and this is only for the transition block. Once it's imported, this timeout is not applicable anymore.
Merrick?
I want to raise one more thing, because we notice it on our internal node, Nethermind Teku, and we started discussing it with Adrian. And the issue is that we are returning that we are in sync as Nethermind, but our logic is that we are downloading the history. We are trying to reach the head, and we are returning that we are in sync, but we are still downloading the history of the chain, so old blocks, old receipts, and it seems like Teku is shut down because of that, and we are wondering with Adrian what we can do, because the solution could be to change if syncing logic or adjust CL client.
That's a question for Adrian from Teku.
So what's the issue? Why is this breaking stuff? Is it because Teku is asking some old blocks because they say, okay, you're
yes.
okay.
Yes, and I'm wondering, Marius, you are returning syncing only if you have all history, or how is it working in F? Okay.
And
with
Marius, then Paul,
with
or Paul, then Marius.
With Lighthouse, we were tracking using is syncing on the ELs to try and help us understand when the EL is syncing, but we just found that it wasn't reliable enough for us. We found that there's a few funky occasions where Geth will tell us that it's like is or isn't syncing. I can't remember what it was, so we just decided to give up on it, and we don't track that anymore.
Marius.
Yeah, the issue is we return not syncing if we didn't start the sync yet, I think, and that's like some corner case, so you cannot really rely on this syncing.
Lucas.
I think the more correct way to say is, if you don't have all the history and the state, then you are still syncing, and you shouldn't return synced.
Yeah, so that's a very good question about the semantics, because what we are doing is, if syncing is a question as if we have the head, we can process the next block. So we return syncing true when we don't yet catch up to the head, when we have some head that we can rely on, and we know that the network isn't further. Then we return syncing false, while we still can download ancient blocks and ancient receipts. So that's the current Nethermind, and potentially we might want to change that based on this discussion.
So Teku needs these historic blocks or the historic receipts for the deposit contract, right?
In this particular issue that we're hitting is slightly different to just the deposit receipts. I suspect the next thing we'd hit is that we'd be searching block ranges, but for log events, and I think we get a JSON RPC error back if Nethermind doesn't have blocks for the range we asked for. So I think we can handle that, and we'll just kind of keep retrying that. But the code that's causing problems is our search for the minimum genesis block, the first block that meets the conditions. It's probably not, but it's not required now that we have mainnet genesis, so we can pull it out. It's just really complex, and we haven't disabled the ability to run and actually calculate genesis from the execution layer yet.
So which genesis? That's beacon chain genesis.
Beacon, yeah.
Yeah, beacon chain genesis, and it's the first block that could have triggered that if there were enough deposits, which on mainnet I think was the block that triggered it. Part of it I think is that a while back, like way back, we actually added code to handle, I think probably Nethermind, that didn't have all the blocks back to Genesis. And so as we were kind of doing a binary search to find this block, we'd get blocks that just didn't exist in history. And so we assume, well, it must be after that because you didn't bother syncing those old blocks. But when you are still in the process of syncing, that's now leading us astray because we're trying to find a block that's way too recent. And then it's failing the check when we try and confirm it really was the right block. So there's a few tweaks we can do. It sounds like it's only affecting Teku as well. So other clients have either skipped that logic or done it in a slightly different way, or for whatever reason. We'll be able to work around it. But it is probably, no, it'll be all right. If the request for deposit logs are rejected, we'd then fall back to a different node anyway. Although post-merge, it doesn't matter as much anyway. It's a really interesting case because saying you're in sync, and Teku sort of uses that, we kind of expect that you've got that history. And I suspect there'll be some other surprises in different cases from people getting block history in that case.
Yeah, I do think the semantics here are much more about I have the state with respect to the head and can process blocks built upon it. And that extending the assumption beyond that's probably dangerous because everyone can have all sorts of different like historic modes and stuff, and or even pruning. Obviously, there's not a lot of like most blocks are kept, but even 444 could like change the pruning depth and stuff like that. So like the assumptions there shouldn't be about the depth. Should only be about the head, I think.
Yeah, I think there needs to be some indication there, though, that how far back do you have? Because we're kind of changing some of these semantics now. It's
I mean, I don't know if I'd couple these head semantics with depth semantics. We're using the ETH APIs are much more reliable with respect to that. There might be rules about how deep you should have. But I don't think that like syncing versus valid in the head in the engine API should dictate those depths as logic premises.
Yeah, so the problem I think then we're getting is just that we're asking for a block and we can't tell I don't have this yet versus I'm never going to get this. And so we're handling it as in we're never going to get this because that's what it used to be. So the syncing is kind of, it would patch over it if you were still saying syncing because we would just treat the node as offline.
Right.
But it might be, the other option here might be that if you are intending to download a block but don't have it yet, return a JSON RPC error instead of empty, because then I know, hey, you're just not ready for that. That would also fix Teku. I suspect we'll change Teku as a result of this. It's just, I can certainly imagine a bunch of other applications having surprises. Someone like Infura would see the node is syncing, they wouldn't go and check all the old blocks. So there's got to be some indication to say, actually, this node is not ready for service yet. Otherwise, it kind of gets thrown into the JSON RPC pool and does all kinds of weird things.
Right, and I agree with that. I think the conflating of the engine API semantics is not going to give us what we want here. Do we have enough information to move forward and can move on to the next issue? Any other points on this one?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that it's very important from CL perspective. When EL validates and processes the merge transition block, if the terminal block has been received previously by this EL, so all data that are required to execute this block are available. Otherwise, if it's returned syncing or accepted, the CL will stall for 128 blocks. Also, there was from what I understand, there was a bug in the test that checks this particular scenario, and we are going to fix it. And this is what is important to be fixed in EL clients before the mainnet merge. If it's not already implemented as expected.
Lucas.
So I would like to ask other execution engine clients to how they are implementing this ETH syncing in terms of that. Can be offline answer if needed, but I'm really interested if we should change it or not.
In Aragon, we say that if we have anything missing, we reply with syncing. We don't download anything in the background. If we do that, we reply with the syncing.
Yeah, because you don't have the state sync, right? You have to have all the blocks to execute them. So
correct.
I think that's fairly obvious for your syncing method.
Also, Besu downloads everything before in the backward sync before saying that in sync.
I believe it's the same for Geth. And also because like history is way easier to sync than state at the moment. You should already have the history when you finished with the state sync.
No, our snap sync can take like 3 hours, while downloading old receipts can take a long time.
Okay.
For
Then
us,
maybe we should work on our snap sync.
yeah, we are always syncing state faster than history. So
It's way faster. Maybe we should work on our history sync, but it's way
yeah,
faster.
Okay, I think we should move on to the next discussion point, and if there's additional discussion here, let's take it to Discord. Okay, other discussion points from Perry's summary that client teams would like to go into. Discussing an issue that arose that is going to be patched, maybe some additional test vectors that should be put in. Anything else on the Goerli discussion?
Paul here. I just wanted to say that I had a good dig through fork choice just before we finalized the merge transition. There are a few forks floating around. I found none of them to be particularly interesting. So yeah, I didn't really find anything to be concerned about regarding consensus layer fork choice. Just looked like a kind of bit of an unhappy network trying to sort itself out, and it did.
Thanks, Paul. Other Goerli discussion points?
So one thing I saw was that some of our nodes lost a lot of peers. Like most of them didn't lose any or stayed mostly the same. And then a couple of nodes that went off probably went off on the wrong port. I think it was Nethermind client combinations. They almost lost all of their peers.
On the execution layer or consensus layer, or both?
I think it was on the consensus layer. So maybe the peer scoring is a bit harsh.
Aggressive.
Yes.
Perry, some of the Nethermind was restarted, so they had to repeer. I'm just gonna. Perry said that, saying that out loud.
Nethermind execution had a problem, right?
Yes.
I think it couldn't.
Yeah, which we've discussed. But if the node restarts was actually in line with also the peer drops, it'd be good to know.
I think at least from the time that I looked at it, it was more a gradual decline.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the graph now. I think they went from 50 peers to about 30. and then back up after a while.
So when I looked at it, it was more like 50 to like 5. And that's why I was that's why I'm a bit not really concerned, but I think the peer scoring might be a bit too aggressive.
Right.
But not really.
Yeah, no, it's good to know. And that, I mean, if the peer scoring is aggressive, that could also account why some of these forks were 3-4 blocks instead of just 1 and quickly resolved. If there's like kind of transient network partitioning going on there. Let's, on the consensus layer side, can investigate that a bit. Okay. Other Gourley items? Great. Mikhail, TBH?
Yeah. Does any EL client team want to share their progress on the terminal block hash override implementation?
We
It's
still
not
don't have it.
Sorry, go first.
Yeah, we still don't have it. It's we only have the override on the networking layer, but that will make us only peer with peers that have this specific block. So we should. I'm not 100% sure how it works, but we should, like, if you specify this, then you are guaranteed to have this block in your blockchain.
Right. I mean, at this point, I think having a credible path to do this in an emergency is more important than having it top down, fully implemented. That's my take. Andrew, you had a comment?
We haven't implemented it either.
Thank you.
For us, it's still in PR because we want to focus on today's issue and if syncing, and probably we will review it later a bit because it could potentially introduce some regression. So we need to be careful with merging it.
Right. Back to my previous comment, I might not even merge it. I might have it there, proof of concept, and ready to use, in an emergency, not affecting the code base at this point. Okay, thanks for the update. Mikhail, anything else on that one?
No, thanks everyone. And agreed with the above comment from Danny.
Okay, Paul, specing the placeholder TTD in Engine API.
Yeah. So when the TTD is not specified yet, we still want the EL and CL to be able to do exchange transition config and do that successfully, just so that users can set up their stuff before the merge and see that things work. There is a standard for this on the consensus layer about the value that we use when none is defined. It's a very high value. There doesn't seem to be anything on the EL side. It seems that I think Geth returns none, and I've seen Nethermind return 0. My proposal is that we take the standard that already applies to CLs and also apply it to ELs. So basically, ELs, you copy and paste this very large number from my PR and then put it in your code base. And if you don't know what the TTD is, then you just return this high number. Yeah, I think it should be fairly easy to implement. I think we've already got a bit of buy-in from people. Just wanted to raise it and see if there's any objections.
So there's a bit of a race at this point, Paul, depending on the next discussion point, as to whether there will even be client releases between now and when we have a TTD. Does that affect your desire to get this merged?
Yeah, so it might be that we figure out the mainnet TTD before people get around to implementing this. I I don't know, I'd be tempted to just implement this. It's not a big deal if you don't, but it's kind of helpful because, you know, there's other people running other test nets elsewhere, like Gnosis and stuff that haven't decided theirs yet. And it just makes life a little bit easier. But yeah, no one's going to die or nothing bad's going to happen if you don't implement it. But if you can spare the cycles, I would try to do it just for cleanliness, future sanity.
I think I already implemented something like this. I'm not sure if it's merged or not.
Right, because the agreement last time we brought this up was it wasn't necessarily going to be spec, but people were going to do it. I know that if something's not spec'd, it's less likely to be done. But let's. I could go either way on the spec, but if people get this out, that would be great. Other comments? Okay, if this issue is relevant to you and you care, please go to the engine API, execution API's PR that was linked and comment. If we're going to do this, it probably makes sense to complete it by maybe end of day tomorrow. So if you feel strongly one way or the other, please chime in. Okay, on the last Awkward Dev call, we had discussed picking a mainnet Bellatrix epoch today and a tentative TTD today to then potentially be overridden next week in the event that we see a precipitous drop due to the 5 gigabyte threshold on miners on the DAG size, and to do client releases shortly after. Can we trying to here? Yeah, Tim, why don't you give an update on DAG size, just so we can understand the timing there.
Yeah. So I don't have like a perfect understanding of this, but I think it's good enough for our purposes. As I understand it, when we say the DAG exceeds 5 gigs next week, it's actually the DAG plus the size of the block hash that exceeds it. So it's right under 5 gigs, and then which means that if you store the block hash elsewhere, you can keep using those miners, and you can kind of fix that through a firmware update. Even when the DAG exceeds 5 gigs, it seems like there's at least some ways where people can use 5 gig cards and like probabilistically get like a valid DAG if they only query kind of the subset that they have in RAM. And the more I digged into this, the more it seems like there's a long tail of strategies of increasing complexity that you can do if you want to maintain that hardware, which leads me to think that like the odds we see an extremely high drop right when this hits are low. Historically, we haven't seen kind of really big drops when we've hit a thresholds. We've seen some drops, but they're like on the order of noise in hash rate. So I think it's fine to pick a TTD and reconfirm it next week. But it's probably safe to like wait until we hit that and see do the like what share of the hash rate did the network who just run like the vanilla firmware and do no optimizations represent, and is there a fall off there? But I suspect like after that, there's an increasingly complex amount of tricks you can do to keep maintaining that hardware, and so different actors will be able to do that. Yeah, so I guess all this to say is like we should probably wait just to be like extra safe, or at least probably reconfirm next week just to be extra safe. But I don't think like even if next week is when we hit it, or when the DAG actually exceeds 5 gigs, excluding the block hash, we'll see like a massive drop.
Thank you, Tim. So potential information in about a week, but actually unclear if we'd see like a discrete drop, depending on how people are programming their hardware and how the hardware is actually constructed. Good to know. In such a timeline, we would be aiming to, on probably Tuesday the latest, not this coming Tuesday, but the following, to do a blog post with client releases. Thus, client releases would need to go out Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Monday. Quick turnaround helps us make sure that we kind of keep the timeline rolling, and some of these more exotic attacks around accelerating TTD we kind of have our eye on and kind of can keep things tight. Tim, should we go over the Bellatrix doc and the Gorley, I'm sorry, and the TTD doc, or do we want to have other types of discussions around strategy first?
I guess, you know, on both the EL and CL side, like, are people comfortable with that timeline, right? Like, that's probably the main thing. Then we can, it's like, yeah, are people comfortable with those timelines? And if so, we can look at, you know, the specific epochs and TTD and base them off that. But it's, yeah.
Hey, I just want to confirm. So we're looking at the week of August 22nd. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. So this is Prism. So I spoke to the team, and majority of them has no issue on releasing before August 22nd. Yeah, and that's from our side.
Terrence, you do sound like a robot, but we could understand you. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, I guess, yeah, curious to hear from other teams as well. Or I guess maybe another way, if people don't think this is possible, this is kind of the time to step up.
Yeah,
So
I think
what-
for Aragon, we would like more time, because we kind of we still need some work to do around terminal POW blocks, potentially optimize unwinds, rewinds, especially with, I think it's the case with Teku, but maybe with other CLs as well. So from my point of view, I would like more time.
So I think one strategy in getting more time is to actually do the releases then, but to also set the expectation that there might be strongly suggested EL update releases after Bellatrix, in which we'd have a follow-up blog post, and kind of thus ELs are feature complete and ready to go. If you don't upgrade your node's probably fine, but in the event that there are strongly suggested releases, you do kind of another wave right after Bellatrix to say, hey, these are the releases that client teams recommend. I think that allows us to have a little bit more flexibility in play in getting final releases out, but also at the same time gets us positioned in the coming week and a half. Ansgar?
Yeah, I was just on that front. I was just wondering, my understanding would be that for mainnet, basically the minimum time between having new releases out and being confident that everyone upgraded is something like 2.5 weeks or something. So wouldn't that mean that we basically have to have this minimum 2.5 week period after Bellatrix before we do the merge?
No, what I'm suggesting is that client releases come out in that plus 1.5 week from now, and they're mainnet ready. You know, they work as they did on Gorley today, if not better. But in the event that there are additional releases, we would do a wave after Bellatrix to say, hey, these are the recommended releases, upgrade if you can. Thus, you don't necessarily have the sufficient lead time for everyone to upgrade, but if people do want to patch with the hardened releases, they can. Matt?
Okay, that's reasonable.
Yeah, no, I think the basic team is cool with that timeline, especially given that we could, again, put out another release. My question is, when do we anticipate I know Mikhail mentioned some bugs with Hive test. Can we anticipate those sometime soon, just to make sure that if we have extra time to like double check and button everything up before the releases on the 22nd would be ideal, but if we need to push some of that back, I'm presuming that we understand the bugs in the test and they'll be updated pretty shortly.
Mario or Mikhail, what's the status here?
From my understanding, it should be like an easy fix, but it's better to ask Mario about it. sure if he is on the call.
Do you mean the
yeah.
the gossip testing or
the recent
test
wave of EL tests, I believe, that found a few bugs in corner cases?
Oh yes, there were some for Nethermind, but I think they were already working on it. The new release for this test is already merged, so there's not a substantial increase for all the other clients. I think one test for Geth, and that's it, I think. But there was no substantial increase in bugs.
And these are merged and in public Hive, and teams presumably have seen them and are working on them.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It was merged just today, actually. So the latest run should reflect the current status of tests.
So the test has been fixed, right? And already, if it was even buggy, that was my impression.
Which specific one, or?
Yeah, the test when there is like the terminal block from a site fork and client response syncing. There was some issue with this test. Nethermind passed it, but it didn't work on the Gertie.
Yeah, definitely. That one is fixed. I think that's fixed since the last release, so that should be working even now without the latest update. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mario. Lucas?
I think we are passing most of those new tests. I think I have 2 right now failing in my pipeline. But about those general tests in the this transition test, so I gave Mario feedback that it would be good that the blocks and Hive tests that we are using for those tests would have some unique state changes, each one of them, because this is what we have issue with, that on Hive all the blocks have same state root, but it would be good for all the blocks to have unique state roots on Hive tests, like in all the tests probably. That's my 2 cents.
Definitely. I need to tweak some of the test cases to include more transactions in the mesh, in just the mesh block, so we can have a different state root. And yeah, but that's work in progress.
Okay. Other input on the suggested timelines on the suggested release strategy?
What's the expected date for Bellatrix?
That's what we would get into now. Actually, Adrian and I believe Tim was doing a couple of additional estimates this morning. Can y'all talk us through and share the document?
Yeah, let me just get the document shared. So there's a few options.
I share your document in the chat. I can share my screen if that's helpful, or if you want to share yours.
Yeah, just trying to move things onto the right screen so I can not have it all to be.
He's got like 8 screens over there.
Yeah, it's the only way to monitor it. You know where to find it. Yeah, right. So this is working on the basis of essentially what we just talked about, that these dates become in range, with the idea that we'd have releases out set around August 19th. We're tweaking, we kind of sounds like we want to have that weekend up our sleeves as well. So we're probably looking at the later range for these dates. 1st September would be just less than 2 weeks away from the thing. It now gets to more like week and a half. So I'd say we're kind of looking at the Monday, Tuesday type time frame. I think the first thing to set is, are we happy with these kinds of dates? Like, we can pick specific numbers easily and we can make them pretty, and I can show you the slot picker and that kind of thing. But I'd be thinking either Monday 5th or 6th about activating Bellatrix based on these conversations.
I believe someone commented on the 5th that that is a national holiday in the U.S. and that even corporations might be off.
Right.
So pushing into the 6th, I think, does make sense. As for consensus layer teams, just in some conversations over the past day, that I believe that there's no objection to moving forward on that. But please correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, I agreed 145000. It's really easy to eyeball that you got that right instead of like having a copy paste error or something.
Yeah. So I mean, if we're going for Tuesday
Okay.
at 6, that's probably a good one. It is very late for Europe.
It's 10 p.m. It's not 4 a.m., right?
That's probably 11 or 12.
Oh, because
13
UTC is
in
not.
Moscow.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I did fudge that one a little.
Is any of these epochs on a, what is it, 8,192 slot boundary such that we get a an even multiple for the block routes table to be fresh for the merge?
I doubt it.
Those two are not. If somebody wants to find one, they can. I think, let's see.
What's the benefit of that? Or...
Well, we have these block routes and state routes, and above all historical routes tables lists in the beacon state, and they rotate every 8,192 blocks. So
then you can have like the rule set be the same for all batches.
Got it.
Yeah, exactly.
The next one I think is 147456, which I think is moderately substantially later. If
the one before that would be 142-ish. So I do think it is, yeah, either too early or we delay by another couple days just to hit that. Which would basically be 2 days, right? Or more like 5 days, because like between 143 and 145, you get about 5 days. And so between 145 and 147, you'll get another 5 days. Which seems...
Yeah.
That sounds strange. It's 27 hours per cycle.
Oh, slots. Sorry, I was doing. I did epoch math, which is wrong. Someone can.
So that should be that should be
yeah.
trivial,
It's easy. Actually. It's easy to bump. My apologies on that. Let's redo that.
So is a for the beacon chain, is multiple of that better than neat, like epoch boundary, basically?
We did so on Altair, right?
Okay.
I think I would rather keep with that for the potential use cases there, for the cleanliness there, than keeping a round slot. I could be convinced otherwise, but I don't see a reason not to. My apologies on getting that math totally wrong, but let's run a quick couple numbers on that.
Yeah. And so I guess which...
Sorry.
Oh, please go ahead.
So it's 256 epochs that we need to be round to.
Okay, so we can figure out which of these epochs we like the most, and then find the closest multiple from there, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's actually quite convenient when they line up. I mean, it's kind of like a clean slate where we get this unique number for the state that corresponds to the
purely one rule set or the other.
Fork, yeah. And not only that, but it actually ends up in all historical beacon states for the future because of the historical roots thing. So we'll get like that particular hash will be in the beacon state forever.
That does it make that much sense, given that the TTD is unpredictable and we will not be able to.
So it's the
match
Bellatrix rule set, right? But then you have a transition during the Bellatrix rule set, but it's the same code whether TTD has been hit or not. There's just conditionals on the code whether you're doing X or Y. So I see what you're saying, but I think that from like a consensus layer perspective, that's when the upgrade happened, and that's when you're running the new logic, even though the TTD isn't happening yet.
I see. Yeah.
I would be cautious of fulfilling that 8192 rule though. If it's going to land the update at some really awkward time for a majority of users, I would think that if we want this to go smoothly, doing it when users are online to update their nodes is probably the most important thing. Not necessarily, making it so it's nice round number 10 or even fulfilling that 8192 goal.
But that's
so nice to have both. But
can we sanity check the 8192 just real quick then?
Yeah. So I think we'd be looking at 144896, which is that time that I hope you can see and is highlighted there. So it's still on 6th. It's pretty reasonable for everyone except LA.
That's like plus. Was that plus how much time from the previous?
So that's a little bit before the nice round number.
Oh, okay. So that was like minus 10 hours,
Basically
minus
that
9
morning
hours.
instead of at night. Yeah.
Okay. And what does LA's at 4:30? We've definitely had forks at 4:30 on West Coast because I know Terrence has been on them pounding coffee.
It's 1 a.m. here now, so I'm not entirely sympathetic.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't think that that's like bad for users. I'm fine with saying that is a good tentative number and that we will kind of circulate it in a PR and put thumbs ups on it.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Great. Moving on to TTD, which Mario Havel has been working on a doc here on predictions. Mario.
Thank you, Danny. So yeah, let me share the doc. Thank you, Tim. Yeah, thanks, Danny, for sharing the doc. So should I share my screen as well?
Yes, please.
Yeah, just a second. Yeah, let me know if you can see it. Yeah, thank you. Good. So yeah, so I would like to present the proposed TTD value for the merge, which this doc explains the strategy behind choosing the number, and I'd like to get feedback on that and present the values itself. So just to give you a quick overview on how the number for the TTD is picked. First, it's using polynomial regression from past few weeks. So basically data on difficulty in the network from past few weeks extrapolated in next 2 weeks to predict what value of total difficulty will be reached at a given time. It's done using the prediction tool, which you might notice if you followed Borel WTF. It's pushing the it was used for predicting the testnet merges before. So with this, we establish what is roughly the difficulty, the total difficulty to expect at the given date. But the problem is that the accuracy of this is purely depends on how the hash rate will evolve, on the volatility of hash rate. So we have to understand what hash rate levels are we working with. Looking at the current trends in the hash rate, we saw in May that it peaked at all-time high, and then in June dropped significantly, and currently we are under 900 terahash. On average, it's like 880 terahash. Of course, price has certain influence on this because the hash rate depends on the profitability of mining. So here is chart since January on where just the price and the hash rate is put together. So you can see that the hash rate somewhat reacts to the price changes as well. And why to look at the hash rate? So we can, because the total difficulty is basically just the cumulative difficulty. We can exactly calculate what is the average hash rate in the network needed to achieve TTD at a given time. So here it's visualized over a bigger time frame with an example of total difficulty value, which would be reached during September with current numbers. And what this shows is that, like, to achieve this total difficulty, like during August, for example, you see it's a huge number, like up to 5 petahash, and then it drops fast, and then it declines slowly. So it is the trend that we are working with, and the red part is the September. So this is where we are on the curve. And using this script, you can generate, you can run it just with TTD value or the total difficulty value to generate the charts with, and you can create charts which are below. Why would we consider here with this trend is that what you can see that in the first days, in the first part of the month, basically it takes more hash rate to achieve the value, and then it declines more slowly. So we have like better protection against the uptrend rather than the downtrend. And so I was a bit pessimistic with the estimates because of also the DAX size issue, and I rounded down the numbers, as you will see. So the first scenario was counting on the ballotaries happening on 31st August or maybe 1st September, which if we need like two more weeks to achieve TTD, would be around 15th September. So first here we get roughly the number of total difficulty which will be reached on 15th September. And I rounded down because also we want to have a nice number, which is a bit easier to remember. And this number is, however, it's not much difference to these. It would be like less than 12-hour difference with the current hash rate. So, and these are charts which you can produce with the script above, and these show us basically how much hash rate is needed to achieve the TTD over the time frame, over the period of September. So with this TTD value, you see the red dotted line is the currently something under 900 terahash. So with the current hash rate, it will be hit around the 15th of September. And if the hash rate goes up to, let's say, 1,000 here, it would be like 10th of September. And if it drops to 600 terahash, it would be by end of the or at the beginning of the August. And here you can see is in percentage. So like what percentage change of the hash rate we can expect. And this is a table summarizing it and comparing it to all-time high, hash rate all-time high, and the current value. So you can see that to achieve this immediately after Bellatrix in the first days, it would take a lot of hash rate, which is probably not possible at all. And then by the end of September, even if the hash rate for comparing to current number would go down 30%, we would achieve it by the end of September. And here are other examples of TTD value, which give us more space for hash rate drop to be achieved by this drop by the merge is meant as the 15th of September. So if hash rate drops by 5%, this value would be achieved on the 15th, right? And you can use these values with the script to produce these charts if you are interested in details. And the second scenario is with the September 20, where the TTD values are a bit higher. So Here, I rounded down the number again, just a bit more. It doesn't make much difference, but the thing is that we have maybe less room to achieve the TTD here before the before DEFCON. So here you can, here I'm counting it by the October 7th. So the numbers are here, and yeah, it's a bit less room maybe, but still reasonable. Yeah, so I guess that's it. If you saw the doc, if you have any comments, any feedback, please let me know. What do you think about the values, about the approach?
When we say all-time needs to be reached, obviously it's for the entire time period. Is that time period starting today or in plus 1 week from today?
I'm sorry, what do you mean? The all-time high?
Yeah,
for
yeah, to hit those, like in that chart, is that saying all-time high from starting today or all-time high starting in plus 1 week?
This is meant, so this is just compared to the all-time high which was ever achieved in the network. So like that's like the maximum uptrend we can count with.
But it's saying if like literally now we hit all-time high hash rate, this is the date the TTD would be hit, correct?
Yes, yeah.
Literally now or literally 1 week from now, when that would start?
It's
when you did the doc.
It's when I did a doc. Yeah.
Okay.
It's from Monday, so the numbers now would be even higher. Yeah.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
And you know, the next week being kind of the defensive selection of TTD, when probably an attack would actually occur because we would observe and adjust between now and then, that makes the number even higher.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically, the chart would stretch, and you can generate a chart and see by yourself to get the exact number for the current moment, because it'd be hard to update this all the time. But yeah.
Okay.
Basically, the closer we are, the more it takes to achieve.
Okay. So one of the things we'd also be observing over the next 7 days would be an increase in hash rate, such that one of these kind of timing attack scenarios might occur. And if we didn't, then we're in an even better position with respect to the timing attack scenarios and what it would require starting a week from today. So Mario, none of those. So there's been a bunch of chat going on. It seems like there's certainly a compromise and a bit of a debate as to how far after you do this with respect to what is likely a September 6th Bellatrix. We see 2 weeks. We see someone arguing for even less than a week. But we also see, at least from the people who have been participating in that, something like a 10-day compromise, which I think, adjusting for the numbers that Mario gave us, knowing that we would have really good visibility on them on such an attack on plus 1 week from now, 10 days is probably in that like safe spot with respect to all-time high, which we can crunch those numbers a bit more. That's at least the synopsis from what's going on in the chat. I'd now open it up to discussion points on plus X days from Bellatrix. Ansgar?
Right. So I just wanted to basically say that just because like any such attack we would see like well in advance, as you're saying, basically, I mean, some of these calculations say like basically the hash rate would have to have spiked since Monday already, or would spike basically today or whatnot. So we would see this well in advance. So I think basically kind of talking too much about the specific kind of delay in days kind of gives this impression as if that would be a time period in which we would have to react, which basically at that time it's already too late, right? So like the time period to react would be between now or whenever the kind of the attack would start,
right,
and Bellatrix. And so I personally would be very comfortable with even like a relatively small kind of delay in days between Bellatrix and TTD, just because that's not the time period that would have to allow us to react. So I personally think that like a week is plenty.
So there are two things to balance here. One would be in the event that something with Bellatrix goes wrong, a sufficient amount of time to resolve those issues. And then another is if we're going through the strategy that we will make it very clear that there will likely be hardened EL releases after Bellatrix, some sufficient lead time in posting that blog post and
we can also have
TTD
the
happening.
EL releases like
Sure, it could be 2 days
around
before.
Bellatrix.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that does.
So at least I don't think I would go less than a week. I think a week with the error on TTD means it could even be 5 days, 4 days. Just on my gut. So yeah. Other takes on the plus X days from Bellatrix?
I'm for 10 days at least. And I think we also have to consider that a lot of people did not follow this discussions. They need to have time to set it up, and they would set it up in the last possible moments. So if we give them a couple more days to set it up, then it's
Right.
way better.
That is a good point. There are there are many types of users. There are validators who will have this set up before Bellatrix. Almost all of them. Someone will forget. But then there's actually all other types of users, which some of them actually seeing Bellatrix happen might be them to prompt actually setting up their nodes, because they wouldn't actually be knocked off the network before then. So there's a bit of an argument that there is a type of user that would be actually waiting till that last window to really be kicked into gear.
I would argue that type of user is likely very common, because if you only want to upgrade once and you don't want to do anything, you're going to wait until the day before or 2 days before, enough time that you can make sure your node syncs and turns on. But if you know like the hardened releases are going to come out later, you don't want to deal with that. You want to do it all at once. And so I suspect there will be some users who wait until a very large portion of users who wait until the last minute. Where last minute is those hardened releases,
Yeah.
and Bellatrix is stable and everything looks like it's healthy.
So other weighing ins on this.
One question is on the TTD built into clients. Do we expect clients to have the TTD built in, or do we
Yes.
force users to set a TTD flag just so that
No, we would
can
want the
keep more
releases.
readily?
We would want the releases to be ready with the TTD, and this is why we would, tentatively choose it today. Client teams can pull out a PR, with that value. Doesn't need to be merged, and then we reconfirm on all core devs next week, and then you can merge that number. So users don't need to use a flag except in like the emergency scenario where we do a TTD override for a reason or another.
Will we be doing mainnet shadow forks after Bellatrix? And do we need extra time for those?
I think the mainnet shadow forks will continue until the merge
We can
happens.
do them before Bellatrix as well.
Yeah, we'll definitely have them before, and shoving one or two in the middle also does not sound like a bad idea, especially if client releases are still rolling out.
Yeah, the plan is to have them like every week with the latest recommended releases.
And so if we want at least one, so that means if we do them once a week, do they take, is there a minimum amount of time we need in order to get at least one shadow fork in after Bellatrix?
Why do we need a shadow fork after Bellatrix?
Because
We're
EL clients might have hardened releases around them, additional releases around them.
I mean, I just think if we're setting a TTD, we're making the decision to ship. So shadow forks are useful to keep testing out, but I don't think we need to condition on it because we've made the decision to ship. We're
Oh yeah, I'm not.
By now, we shouldn't be setting this.
I wouldn't be suggesting conditioning on them, but they are valuable tests, and if somebody has a regression last minute, we want our users to be ready and willing to ship an upgrade. And if we found a regression and patch something, then it will be good to find the regression, and it'd be good to patch it.
And in practice, like, you know, we usually have them midweek. We have Bellatrix happening on a Tuesday, North American days. Usually shadow forks happen on a Wednesday or Thursday, and then we'd have another week from like that shadow fork before hitting TTD on mainnet. We could literally have a shadow fork the day before mainnet if we really want to. Yeah, so I think we have plenty of time to like have a shadow fork, fix massive like last minute issues from it, do a TTD override if we found something absolutely terrible on that shadow fork, and still not be hitting TTD.
Okay, so it does seem like people are generally okay converging on a compromise. There's a bit of a call for a September 15th number, which I think was advertised in Mario's document. 10 days would be that September 16th. Are there other things we need to discuss right at this point, or can this show up in a PR and a suggestion and we can circulate yays or nays there?
Yes, let's do it.
We'll be sending you a mic, Marius. Micah?
Just on timing, I feel like Thursday is better than Friday if we're picking between the two. Just because no one wants to get things on.
Yeah, we're not though. We're picking the illusion of the time, right? Like we're picking.
Sure. Like if we target Thursday, we're more likely to hit not the weekend than if we target Friday. If we target Friday, it's very likely we'll hit a weekend.
Right.
It's nice. We can try to not hit the weekend.
Oh, I agree. Yep. Okay, so yeah, it seems like in the chats, the original number suggested by Mario of 5875 and zeros all the way to the end has rough consensus. So I can open a PR on the execution specs. I guess we'll open a PR for Bellatrix as well on the CL specs, and can probably merge that PR on the CL specs and just reconfirm on our core devs this number in case we see something funky on the network, or if for whatever reason the calculations are wrong. So people basically have a week to just sanity check that number. But the assumption is if it is actually the right estimation and we don't see anything weird on the network with regards to hash rate, we would merge that and expect client releases pretty quickly after.
Okay. Any other comments here before we move on? Great. We have about 15 minutes left. I don't think that we're going to get to the 4844 discussion today. I think MEV boost stuff is a bit more pressing with respect to shipping the merge. First of all, is there a general kind of MEV boost status update? And then we can get into these two items of discussion. And it's okay if there's not.
I don't know if I have anything to add.
Okay.
I think I see Leo on the call.
I'm here, sure. But well, the general status update is the same as last week, testing and focusing on liveness issues for mitigating extreme cases and working on the relay monitor. So I think just talking about the monitor seems appropriate here, unless you have questions.
Okay, great. So the first point, which was brought up by Alex, is clarify local building should happen in parallel. Alex, can you talk about this, please?
Yep. Yeah. So there's two PRs that I'd like to discuss. The first one should be pretty straightforward. Let's see. I'm going to try. Yeah, let me drop it in the chat. So this is really just a clarification in the builder specs, and it concerns how proposers should be using this external builder network that exists via MevBoost. And the way the spec was written is, I think you could interpret it as, so basically there's this timeout where if you call to get an external block or a remote block, you basically give that network, like, let's say a second before you should say, okay, they're not going to like help me now and I should build locally. Without this PR, I think you could read it as I should not do anything until I know that decision. Whereas it's much better to have started building ahead of time. And that's all this PR does, is clarify that you should do both things in parallel.
Which I'm in very strong agreement of. There's a point of no return when you sign that like blinded block, but
Right,
before then,
which is also called
you
out
really
in
need
the
to be
specs.
ready. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, this one's more informational. Just be aware of this if you have some spare cycles, which I know we all have tons of time over the next few weeks. But if you have some spare cycles, just double check that this is the behavior that your beacon node and or validator clients are following.
Thank you. And then Alex, I believe you have the next item as well, which is the circuit breaker, which was discussed, I believe, a couple calls ago. What's the status update here?
Yeah, so we discussed this on the last CL call. Just to refresh everyone, this is the idea that regardless of this external block building network or not, we could still get in a case where suddenly there's a liveness, a series of liveness faults, even a liveness failure on chain, right? So things could get quite serious. And the idea is, okay, it could be possible that this external network is doing this. And so the sort of most paranoid and or most sort of secure thing we can do is just stop using it, at least temporarily. So I had this like a sort of sketch of a proposal last time. I've refined that into a PR. So yeah, I suppose I would like to get feedback on that. I'm not sure if you guys have had time to review the PR. I guess I can just at a high level go through it. And the idea is that there's some rolling window. So basically you look at, let's say, an epoch of slots, and that's a rolling window over the current head. Oh yeah, thanks, Terrence. So the PR is here, 47 on the builder specs. You have this rolling window, and then basically if you have some number of missing blocks within this window, you say, okay, circuit breaker on, and I do not use MEV boost. When that condition reverses, in the sense that within the rolling window, I don't have that many missing blocks, then I'm free to use it again if I want. So then the question is like, yeah, how do we pick these numbers? I have a suggestion here, basically saying like, if there's around half of the blocks missing in a given slots per epoch number of slots, then we trigger this thing. I think we can probably talk about these numbers, and or yeah, if people want to take a look, that would be nice. But yeah, I guess first, are there any questions right now from what I've said or something that was unclear?
So there's probably two design points here. One is to do rolling and be able to turn it back on, in which we could probably have a smaller window, as you suggested, with 32. Or we don't have rolling and it's just, you just turn it off and needs manual intervention, at which you'd want a much longer window with an assumed adversary size so that they couldn't, with random shuffling, they wouldn't be able to, adversary of size X wouldn't be able to do that and just cause the shutdown.
Right. So I don't know if people have any of the, if the CL devs have opinions here. The idea with the rolling window is that it basically makes it such that there's automatic recovery. So the thinking is that it makes it a bit harder to game, just because, you couldn't trigger this somehow and then take off the whole block building network for like, a half a day or something while people recover. Instead, it would be this like automated recovery.
I guess there's a complexity argument. One is every time you're just querying your state, because you can check empty slots from your state, and it's a dynamic quick query. The other would be, I guess, a query along with maybe a database flag to turn it on and off. My intuition is actually the former, with the rolling window is less complex, but I could definitely be wrong there.
Right. And so this also kind of segues into like, I don't know if there's a second design point that you were going to call out, but essentially, moreover, this PR suggests that clients actually randomize their values within this window. And so the idea is that if you don't know exactly what your client is going to do, then it's much harder to game, right? And you sort of get this like herd immunity across the whole network, because you know, this node is doing one thing, this node's doing another. So it becomes much harder to like find these boundaries to try and trigger this thing maliciously.
I mean, you do still get like a probability distribution, which often is enough for an attacker to do something. But yeah, I would have to think about it a bit more.
So in Lighthouse, we actually have an implementation of this rolling window, and we check for like if there's been 8 skips in the last epoch, and it was pretty simple to implement. But yeah, open to making it like a random number of skips in an epoch or something like that. Yeah.
So yeah, Prism has rolling windows too, just that was easy for us to implement. We haven't decided on a number yet, so we're still talking internally. And I want to point out one thing we're doing differently is instead of counting the missing slot as like an orphan block, we count the missing slot as the block that has never arrived. So they kind of give us a little bit of client diversity there too. So I thought that's nice.
Okay, so you're not just doing a direct state read. If you actually had a block for slot in, even though it didn't make into the canonical chain, you're going to count that as a hit.
Yes.
Interesting.
Something that I believe Lighthouse has is the ability to user configure the number of skip slots. I think that's nice because it gives us the diversity as well. And I think it's also useful as well because I think there's going to be some users out there that are kind of just, you know, hardcore. I just want all my MAV and never to stop. And I'm generally of the opinion that we probably want to try and like allow them to run safely without creating forks and trying to manage their own repos and stuff like this. So yeah, giving users the ability to tune that I think is helpful.
So we could just say in the builder spec recommended value, and but that it's tunable. I mean, it's not a consensus value, so you can't enforce it really anyway.
So we would just apply one fix, like, you know, pick a number 16 out of 32 blocks or slots, and then also say, by the way, let the user configure this.
Yeah, I would pick a number that we kind of deem safe under different considerations, and then say that it can be configured locally.
Okay, so another consideration here is that it would be great to have this rolled out before the merge or as soon as possible. Right? So I think taking that into consideration, this is hopefully something that's like pretty straightforward to implement and it isn't too hairy. So I guess if no one has any comments on the general design, then yeah, we could take the specific parameterization to the PR.
Okay, great. I don't believe that starting this 4844 points of discussion, there are many points of discussion, is going to be fruitful in the next 4 minutes, so I would suggest we defer until the next call. Given that, okay, Tim, please.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think that's reasonable. There's nothing that's like urgent for today.
Great. So let's, are there any other final discussion points for today? Excellent. Thank you, everyone. I will talk to you very soon and talk again on All Core Devs in 1 week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.